morning, everyone. Good morning. Thank you all so much for being here on this beautiful Thursday morning. My name is Congressman Jamaal Bowman. I represent New York's 16th Congressional District that covers the Northeast Bronx and Southern Westchester County from Mount Vernon to White Plains, New York, and everything in between. Prior to running for Congress in 2020 and winning what some would call a historic election, I had the privilege of serving in our New York City public schools for 20 years. I started my career as an elementary school teacher in the South Bronx before becoming a high school guidance counselor and dean of students, before having the privilege of opening my own district public middle school in the Northeast Bronx. District public middle school, not charter school, because we need to invest more in our public schools to unlock the unlimited potential of our kids and stop sending our public school money to charter schools. That is the reason why I remained in education for 20 years, and that is the reason why, and that was the mission of our middle school. But our public education system is obsolete, and it has been obsolete for many, many years. And we have been implementing a practice over the last 23 years that has been detrimental and harmful to the learning of our children and the well-being of our children, families, and communities. And that harmful practice has been annual standardized testing. When No Child Left Behind was first introduced, their goal, their mission, was to get us to 100% literacy rates by 2015 and to close the so-called achievement gap. There was no conversation about the opportunity gap, no conversation about the impact of poverty on the learning of our kids, and no conversation about how trauma impacts brain development and learning overall. And still 23 years later, we are still having the incorrect, wrong conversations about education, about learning, and most importantly, about the unlimited potential of every single child in America. Because guess what? We cannot have a healthy society, we cannot have a thriving, functioning democracy if we don't have a healthy, robust, fully invested in public education system. You cannot have one without the other. If our education system was healthy and robust and truly unlocked the potential of our kids through quality teaching and learning, we would not have had an insurrection on January 6, 2021. We would not have had the previous presidents, who will remain nameless at this press conference. And we will not have a society that seems to struggle to differentiate between fact and fiction, and seem to struggle with how to critically think about misinformation and disinformation, particularly in our social media environment. So today, we are introducing a bill to end annual standardized testing in America. And that bill is entitled the More Teaching, Less Testing Act. More teaching, less testing. Because our public schools have become test-based factories where the curriculum has become a test preparation curriculum. Very little critical thinking, almost no creativity, almost no giving kids the opportunity to work with their hands. Gym has been sanctioned out. Recess has been sanctioned out. There's no music, no arts, very little sports, particularly in our poorest, most marginalized Title I schools. And enough is enough. If our kids in the wealthiest communities can have a robust, comprehensive teaching and learning and curricular experience, our kids in our poorest, most neglected communities can have the same thing. If kids in private schools don't have to go through annual standardized testing and they get to go to maker spaces and arts classes and music classes and perform in plays, our public school kids deserve the same thing. And let me say this, even wealthier kids in public schools are being harmed by our standardized testing regime. And here's why. Learning is a process of self-discovery, and it's a process of understanding the world around you and the people in it. And this just opens your mind to all that the world has to offer, because intelligence is infinite. And the process of learning should open the infinite doors that are available in life to our children and their families. And instead, over the last 23 years, we have had a myopic, very narrow view of how to measure so-called learning in our schools. So we are focused, and we are pushing to focus the entire country on the magic of teaching and learning that happens in our schools. You know why? Because our kids are magic. Our kids are magic. And it doesn't matter what their race is, or their class, or their background, or their trauma, or their experiences. Our kids are magic. And it is on us as lawmakers to do right by kids, not by testing companies and large corporations who want to attack teachers, attack unions, attack public schools, and close our schools down. Yes. Our kids are going to lead our democracy into a future that works for all people. Yeah. They are going to solve climate change. They're going to solve hunger and poverty. They're going to solve this broken congressional system that's been in place from the very beginning. And it's on us to create and nurture the environment that helps them to solve these problems. They are ready. They are chomping at the bit to take off in our schools and in society, and we are holding them back. No more. The More Teaching, Less Testing Act must be passed. It must be supported by Democrats, Republicans, and independents. It must pass in Congress, and then states must follow suit. Let us work together to unlock the unlimited potential of our schools, our communities, and most importantly, our kids. And this bill will do just that. Thank you all so much. So I'm honored to be joined by so many leaders in education, so many activists who have been fighting so hard on this issue for years. I have worked directly with so many of them. I'm honored to be joined by them. And oh, by the way, and I want to mention this, this bill is endorsed by not just the American Federation of Teachers and not just the National Education Association, the two largest teacher unions in the country. It is also endorsed by the staple, vanguard, pillar civil rights organization in our country, the NAACP. Never before in U.S. history have you had these three organizations working together in an endorsement of a bill like this. It's also endorsed by Gen Z for Change, and I want to give them a shout out because they ride or die with the Congressman Jamaal Bowman office, and I appreciate them for that. So let me call up first Ms. Kim Anderson, the Executive Director of the National Education Association.
Thank you so much, Congressman Bowman. That is what an educator in Congress looks like. That's what it means to have policy informed by the very people who take great pride with their great talent in the process of teaching and learning. There are far too many people, as the Congressman said, who have been talking about education in a way that is devoid from reality. It has been devoid of using equity as our North Star. It has been devoid of the actual reality of what students and parents and communities and families have known all along. It is that our education system should be the fuel for students' dreams, their hopes, their aspirations. Every single student in our public schools should have the opportunity to learn, no matter their race, their background, their income, whether they are able-bodied, native or newcomer. It does not matter who they are. or where they come from. They should have the same opportunities to experience a wide variety of courses and curriculum and learning opportunities.
Also, I have that other instance.
And that's not happening today because of the corrosive impact of our obsession around standardized tests and the use of those tests for improper educational purposes. There's a reason for assessments. Yes, educators can tell you how to assess. If they had listened to Congressman Bowman when they were debating the original No Child Left Behind in the first place, we wouldn't be in this mess. We have to raise our voices, and on behalf of the 3 million educators of the National Education Association across this country, we could not be more proud to stand with Congressman Bowman, fellow educator, policymaker, advocate,
I meant mute,
civil rights leader,
I'll still hear you,
to say that we need a different debate when it comes around to reauthorizing the Every Student Succeeds Act. This is an incredibly important piece of that overall debate because we have to make time for teaching and learning. We have to make time for the joyous process that unlocks the potential of all of our children. We have to make time for it. And right now, our school districts and our schools and our states are bogged down with too much time spent on administering standardized tests. You cannot teach a child and expect a child to learn just by testing them. You can't weigh a pig and expect it to grow. You have to feed it. You have to feed the minds of children. And that's what we do at the National Education Association. All of our members, we stand very proudly together with parents and community members, all of the activists you see represented here, our siblings in AFT. We stand together to pass this great piece of legislation. Thank you very much, Congressman Bowen.
One of the benefits of serving in Congress is I get to engage and interact and learn from communities and people who do work across the country. And I got to meet an amazing person and an amazing organization that I didn't know exists when I was in New York. And this person will be speaking next. Her name is Diana Kanoya. She is the executive director of the National Indian Education Association. And that is so powerful for me to say, because being in New York, you know, we're always talking about people of color, black, Latino, Asian, blah, 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 blah. New York City, at least. I know upstate there's indigenous communities. But again, being in Congress, you're reminded there are indigenous communities all over this country who care about this issue and so many others. So, Diana, thank you so much for being here. Thank you. Yeah.
Good morning, and thank you, Representative Bowman, and everyone that's here, all of our activists, our unions. Thank you for this opportunity to speak in front of everybody to support more teaching, less testing. I am with the National Indian Education Association. We represent American Indian, Alaska Native, Native Hawaiians, educators, students, parents, and community members. I agree with everything that has been said, but I want to add in our many programs, we get to incorporate cultural learning, or what many of you call project-based learning. It is an opportunity to empower our students through curriculum filled with indigenous knowledge, historical indigenous knowledge, traditions, and thoughts and philosophy. These are countless programs across the country that I was able to share with Representative Bowman and his staff. Wild ricing and planting, tapping maple leaves for syrup. These are traditional processes and thoughts and philosophies that have been around for hundreds of years. Our communities use these traditional ways of knowing and doing for math, for science, for history, for social studies, for English. An emphasis in cultural learning, project-based learning, does not limit rigor. It does not limit student learning and growth. It does not diminish the structure of studies. And it does simply rethink how we teach our students and how they learn and how they can test. It is an important tool that we need to do more often of. At its root, thank you. At its root, this is an ongoing discussion about education sovereignty, the freedom to create learning models for generations of students, Indigenous, Black, Brown, Asian, non-Native, international students, immigrant students, in the process and the procedures and their thought and the philosophy they bring to the classroom and their experiences. NIA has been fighting this battle since we were founded over 50 years ago. We understand that big change comes from collaboration and consistent actions. There are so many ways to measure the growth of a student, to foster joy, curiosity, creativity, and support every student to reach their full potential. This is something we can support. This is something we do support through our work and through our votes. When it comes to education sovereignty, it must begin with us. Thank you again for this opportunity.
We must support this legislation through our work and through our votes. And we need for everyone to contact your representative in the House of Representatives and contact your U.S. Senator to support this legislation. Also contact members of your state house, your county government, your local government to support legislation like this. This is going to be transformational in our country, and I guarantee you, your students, the children in your districts, love this legislation. And it is my honor to bring up one of those students representing Gen Z for Change in the building, Brother Jack Petos from Gen Z for Change.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you, Representative Bowman, for allowing me to be here for this momentous day. My name is Jack Petos. I'm an 18-year-old gay rights activist and the mobilization coordinator at the nonprofit Gen Z for Change. Arguably more important, though, I'm a high school student. Currently, I'm very thankful to be in my senior year, earning my IB diploma in late May. And though, like most of my peers, I'm very eager to be moving on to my next academic pursuit, this moment is truly bittersweet for me. Instead of stewing over impending college decisions or what color tile wear to prom, I worry about the future. Worrying about the moment I walk across the stage of graduation, worrying about the moment I depart my small hometown, as when I finally exit, when I finally escape, I'll be in turn leaving behind an education system in ruin. While severe academic pitfalls exist within the state of Florida, Governor DeSantis and an extremist Republican supermajority have worked to institute an agenda of divisiveness and hatred over actual reform. In the past year, I've watched as the LGBTQ+ community, my community, has been erased from existence within the halls of Florida's failing institutions. History lessons have become vague and inaccurate, depicting a whitewashed representation of our nation's bigoted past. Political science, DEI, women and gender sexuality studies have all been outright barred or overhauled within our public schooling systems. And most recently of all, the entirety of College Board's advanced placement curriculum, some of the most vital courses that I have taken, are under scrutiny for appearing too woke. This unrelenting assault on education has touched all who participate within the public schooling system within Florida and across the nation. As students, we must reconcile the hard truth that our education continues to hold lesser merit and nuance than our peers across the nation. Resources, counseling, and generalized compassion for one another has been sacrificed at the expense of the Department of Education's heavy hand. Equally as important, though, is the excess burden being placed upon the backs of those who have sacrificed their lives to uplift future generations. True heroes, our teachers. Already greatly overworked and underpaid, educators are being vilified and forced to walk on eggshells under a guise of parental rights. Some simply cannot bear to continue due to sheer neglect and exhaustion, illustrating a report as recent as January, finding that 100,000 students across Florida do not have access to a full-time teacher. When presented with these daunting challenges and terrifying circumstances, many wonder, where can we go from here? How do we mend these ever-worsening issues? Largely, I view this fight as a two-pronged effort. Firstly, organizers such as myself must continue to put in the work on the ground to fight against this nonsensical attempt to pressure children into a monolith that promotes cruelty. In tandem with this perpetual advocacy, though, we must continue to make strides in the legislature to immediately alleviate the stressors being experienced by both teachers and students. More teaching, less testing is a prime example of these necessary, common sense, and time-sensitive reforms. Due to this impactful piece of legislation, we as students can focus upon our learning in the current political climate and attempt to enrich our curriculum without the burden of deeply flawed standardized exams. Additionally, this bill will permit my teachers more time to craft individualized and transformative lesson plans that can circumvent the vague and pernicious mandates being peddled in Tallahassee. In turn, this approach will assuredly close ongoing gaps in achievement experienced by students in Florida and across the nation and uplift the mental health of everyone within the public schooling system. In closing, I'd like to make a plea to lawmakers from both sides of the aisle, including my own Congressman, Michael Waltz, to support progress like more teaching, less testing. Heed the concerns of your constituents. Take our legitimate fear and frustration to heart. Reform the unfortunate situation at hand. Allow me the same grace that you were once permitted, to unabashedly enter my freshman year, focus on my studies, and to not live in constant fear of the classmates, teachers, and staff that I may have left behind. Thank you.
We do not want an education system rooted in fear. Fear stagnates and stops learning. We want to rebuild and reimagine an education system rooted in joy and love and inspiration, because learning inspires us to have a larger imagination and to do bigger and better things. That is common sense to everyone here. What are we doing? So I also, throughout my work, so not only did I have the privilege of working in public schools for 20 years, I also had the honor of working very, very, very hard to receive a doctorate degree in education leadership. Yeah, we can clap for that. That's pretty awesome. And in my research, I ran across an incredible scholar who's done so much work on this particular issue. And before I bring him up, I want to give a couple of data points. So for 2023 admissions, Emma, you want to record this part. There's some very important data points here. For 2023 admissions, 80% of colleges are not requiring an SAT or an ACT. 80%. And the majority of colleges across the country no longer require an ACT or an SAT. And Columbia University recently decided that they will no longer require an SAT or an ACT for admissions ever again. Columbia is done. Let us follow the lead of Columbia University and end annual standardized testing in America. So it's my honor to bring up Dr. Chris Tankin, scholar, researcher, activist, organizer, and leader on this issue. Chris, come on up, sir. Thank you so much.
Also a former teacher, I'd proudly add. So good morning, everyone. I'd like to thank Congressman Bowman and his team for inviting me here today. It's my honor to speak in support of the More Teaching, Less Testing Act. In my role as a parent of 2 daughters in public school, I've seen firsthand how creativity and innovation in the classroom have been smothered by the blanket of standardized testing that's covered the country since January 8th, 2002. In my daily work as a university professor, I spend considerable time with public schools to help overcome the stifling effects of standard through the use of more creative teaching methods. But I'm often stymied by a common issue raised by educators. They always say that they want to increase creativity and teach their students to think at higher levels more often, but they don't have the time. Their time is being stripped away because they must prepare their students to take the federally mandated standardized test. Simply put, schools are forced to test too much and teach too little. Important skills and dispositions like creativity, innovation, critical thinking, leadership, collaboration are all crowded out of the curriculum by standardized testing. It's those unstandardized skills that transcend time and subject matter and help to develop children into successful and well-adjusted adults. The educational malpractice being committed by over-testing is robbing children of the ability to be more cognitively nimble in a world that increasingly demands flexible thinking. Over-testing is stealing precious time our teachers need to deliver high-quality lessons that all of our children deserve in order to reach their maximum potential. We now have 20 years of evidence that too much testing does not work. No other democratic country in the world subjects its students to as much testing as does the United States. Large-scale standardized testing has proven itself to be a waste of time, a waste of resources, and a waste of our children's minds.
I would say
test results do not tell us anything
right
we
now,
don't
it looks
already
like
know. In
we
fact,
can't.
colleagues and I have predicted test results for schools and
fine.
districts across the country using nothing more than community demographic data tied to zip codes. That's because standardized tests, by their design, are heavily influenced by out-of-school factors. Children learn more from teachers teaching and spending time on task, not by spending more time testing. That's why the More Teaching, Less Testing Act is so important. For the first time since the inception of No Child Left Behind, we finally have a piece of legislation that presents a common sense approach to testing. This act balances the need for accountability with the need for less testing. The act promotes more time spent teaching and learning through innovative approaches such as grade band testing, representative sampling, matrix sampling. It provides states unprecedented flexibility with their testing programs. It increases Title I funding and innovative assessment programs, and ensures students and educators are not unfairly punished by a standardized test score. The Act draws upon decades of research and experience that show you don't need to test all students all the time. With this Act, America's public school educators will be able to teach more. Students will learn more by actually testing less. The Act is cost-efficient, evidence-based, and educationally effective. I wholeheartedly support it, and I hope others will also see the practical value that this brings to public education and support it as well. Our children deserve it. Thank you very much.
Before I bring up our final speakers, I just want to make a comment and a point. The more we invest in education and the more we invest in our children and do education the right way, the less we invest in jails and prisons, the less we invest in health care costs, the more our children are able to contribute to society and contribute to our economy, the more we can explicitly and proactively support the mental health of our kids. See, when we talk about mental health, we often talk about supporting them through counseling and therapy, and that's absolutely needed. But the arts support the mental health of our kids. Sports support the mental health of our kids. Music supports the mental health of our kids. Play, working in a group, working on projects, working with their hands, going outside, learning in nature. These things support the mental health of our kids. If I lived in California and opened a school in California, we would never be in the classroom. We would be outside enjoying the weather, exploring and figuring things out every single day. Our kids are naturally babies, are naturally curious. That's why they fight so hard to crawl and walk and then run and climb and do all the things that they do naturally. We just want to unlock the natural brilliance of our kids. The heck are my colleagues waiting for? What have we been doing? Lord have mercy, I'm sorry. Anyway, so I need to bring up, and I'm going to bring all four of them up at once, because so many people helped me to get to Congress, but I can honestly say I would not be here in Congress without the love and support and activism and organizing of these four people in particular, because I learned to organize and I collaborated with them in organizing during the New York City opt-out movement and the New York State opt-out movement. I watched these 4 and 5 now and many more badass people, and they happen to be women, badass women, stand up to a governor who people thought was Teflon when it came to any issue, in particular education. And not only did they stand up to Governor Cuomo, they kicked his ass. And they told him, you better change this system or we will make sure parents across this state do not participate in this testing nonsense. And it started at maybe, 80,000, went to 200,000, then went to about 300,000 parents refusing to participate in this crap. And so I want to call up Miss Lisa Rudley, co-founder, and I believe your title is executive director of NYSAPE, New York State Alliance for Public Education. Come on up, Lisa, stand next to me, please. I want to call up Jeanette Duderman, co-founder of the Long Island Opt-Out Movement, and she is going to help us win back 2 congressional seats in Long Island, hopefully. I just told her about that. I want to call up Gia Lee over here. Gia in the house, representing more New York City Opt-Out. Who else? A bunch of stuff. Black Lives Matter, a bunch of stuff. And Kamala Carmen, also representing New York City Opt-Out. And what's the name of the other all?
Well,
a bunch of them.
That's who I'm officially representing.
Got it. Well, we have other New York City and New York State activists, which I'm going to take personal privilege to call up right now. Rosalind, come up.
Yeah.
Come on up, Tish. Okay, let's. Perfect. Yes. So I want them to all say a few words, just to introduce themselves and just capture this moment, because the opt-out movement started in New York and then spread across the country, and now it's common practice in many places around the country. So let me give you an order of speaking. Lisa, Jeanette, Gia, Kamala, and then anyone else wants to jump in, okay? Please record this, Emma. Thank you very much.
All right, now I've just cut down what I'm going to say, at least to 30 seconds, give everybody opportunity.
And Lisa and I are
speaking together and speaking with my colleagues over here. Lisa Rudley, founder of the New York State Allies for Public Education, part of a parent and educator and student group throughout New York and throughout the country where we opted out of state tests in a historic time in our country where we said we're not going to participate or have our children participate in these tests. And we made a lot of noise in New York and across the country. It spread. And the help of my colleagues here from New York City, from around the state, Long Island, we made a big difference. And thank you to Congressman Bowman, Dr. Bowman, for going to Washington, for all the work that you've done to bring this proposed bill to reality today. And I guess I would just say, my final paragraph I was going to say, the final words is, assessment should be used as one piece of information in a true supportive feedback loop. This proposed bill would free up the necessary resources to focus on whole child development of the most enriching kind. Let us not continue to push a test and punish culture. Let's get this transformative legislation passed now.
Yes.
Thank you, Jamaal Bowman, for giving us this opportunity, giving us great hope. It was in 2015 that I testified before the U.S. House Senate Committee on Testing and Accountability. And there I spoke out against annual testing, particularly the high stakes attached because of the consequences. I met Jamaal Bowman in a high school on a Saturday when we were organizing a forum to change the stakes, and the rest is history. So I really, really want to speak as a New York City public school teacher on behalf of our students who desperately need the whole child inquiry-based, project-based learning, because all of that is getting shoveled underground to prioritize testing on computers. And I mean, it takes up so much time, resources. Funding in New York City has been cut for education. We need the limited resources we have to go to our children's best whole child education. Thank you, Jamaal.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Kamala Carmen. I am the parent of 2 children who went through New York City public schools, and I am on the advisory committee of NYC Opt-Out, along with Tish and Gia. And this is such an important moment because we can do all the work in our individual states, but as long as the federal mandate for annual testing remains, it remains that most children will not benefit from even the work in their states, because at this point, I am very lucky to be able to say that my children have not suffered a lot of the harms of standardized testing, and that's because I refused the tests on their behalf, and I helped organize their schools to refuse, so that the schools that my children went to had 90 and 95% opt-out rates. That freed up the teachers to have project-based learning, to have like an amazing urban agriculture program in Brooklyn, to have regular field trips. The school that my children went to, elementary school, has Shore School. It has, Tish, you can help me with Forest School, swimming. Like, this doesn't happen in most public schools, and it can happen because we refused the tests at our school. And that meant that the teachers didn't have to be burdened with spending their time doing things that weren't as interesting to the children. And to people who are concerned, like, but if we don't have these markers, how can we tell the children are doing? They won't actually perform. I'm here to tell you that my 2 children are now in college. They did very well in the college admissions game without having ever, my younger one not having ever taken a standardized test in school. They're really thriving. You don't need these tests. And in fact, I would say they hinder you. I would say that they got into all these schools because they were able to nourish their community. And last thing I want to say about that is that there are 38 schools in New York State which are exempt from the Regents exams, which are the high school level tests, and they're constantly under threat, even though they have incredibly good results in terms of college attendance and persistence for their students, even when all that data is disaggregated. And so there are incredible forces against this kind of holistic assessment, and I'm really hoping this bill will help encourage the growth of networks of schools like this.
Yeah. All right.
Let me just, yeah, absolutely. Come. I just want to say one, actually you go first real quick, and then I want to say something.
My name is Rosalie Friend. I'm an educational psychologist. I'm a member of NYSAFE and New York City Opt-Out, and on the organizing committee of Uniting to Save Our Schools. As an educational psychologist, part of my work is on the science of assessment. How do you find out what kids have learned? Our professional association, the American Ed Research Association, and the Professional Association, American Association, Statistical Association, are against these tests because they're not valid and they're not reliable. In other words, the numbers you're getting are not due to what's going on in the schools. So there's another reason for not spending time and money aside from taking away from instruction. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So
he's cut off.
So we have our final speaker. She has arrived. Flight was delayed. She jumped in a cab. She ran up a hill. Luckily, she's in shape and she goes to the gym. So I want to just piggyback on, I think it was Kamala who mentioned it. There are very powerful forces who do not want this to happen. There are testing companies who have made billions and billions of dollars selling tests to states. There are charter school operators who are investing money in charter schools and want to do everything in their power to grow charter schools while closing public schools. There are many who continue to invest money in attacking teachers' unions because when teachers are not in a union, they don't have collective bargaining power, and then the school and the charter network can do whatever it wants with teachers. We're talking about billions of dollars to stop this from happening. But we have students who I have never met in my life, but I could tell you right now, they do not like taking tests every year. Am I right or wrong? Is that right or wrong? Exactly. I had just met them. They walked up, asked them the question. I know the answer. Students are feeling this across the country. They want to design. They want to imagine. They want to create. They want to innovate. They want to swim. They want to dance. They want to sing. They want to play. They want to learn. They want to go outside. They want to do dope, fun, amazing stuff. Instead, we got them in a box in the classroom, in a box in a chair, and asking them to bubble in a circle. You know what's most insidious about this? We're training our children to believe that in life there is one right answer. And in life, there are 50 shades of gray. Like I did that there, it's pretty good. It's a whole lot of gray, okay? A whole lot of nuance. A whole lot of figuring things out. A whole lot of a big question like climate change or racism or sexism or hunger or homophobia or whatever. These are big questions. There are some simple answers, but they're complex. We need our students to learn how to deal with the complexities of life. And guess what? They don't just learn it in English. They learn it on the football field too, and in orchestra, and in other places. What the heck are we doing? Anyway, it's my honor to bring up the president of the AFT, former president of the UFT, former high school teacher in Brooklyn, people forget that, Miss Randi Weingarten.
And asthmatic that just ran up the hill. But this is what teachers do all the time. They MacGyver things, they figure things out. It doesn't matter. It's like, okay, there's a protest there, we go here. That's what has happened, particularly after COVID or during COVID. That's Representative Bowman. That's what I saw in the school you were principal of all the time at Cornerstone. That's what every teacher and every parent who has worked with teachers know. And so the simple proposition is, if we know that what kids need to know and be able to do in the 21st century is problem solve, critically think, work together in teams, not just pace ChatGPT, but actually understand how to analyze, not just do 2 times 2 equals 4 on a computer, but understand how to analyze, understand how to work in a pathway to a career or to college, understand conflicts in fields of gray. All of these things, if that's what kids need to know and be able to do, why would we have an assessment system that bears no relationship to that? And then have tons and tons and tons of test prep on that assessment system, because everything else that teachers are doing in classrooms are supposed to be about preparing kids for the 21st century and for their lives. So there is this huge disconnect between the federal accountability system and what we need to do in schools to help our kids learn, achieve, and actually be the people we want them to be. So that's why this bill is so important. That's why I ran up the hill to be here. Because if everything else is changing, the accountability system has to change with it. And that's why civil rights leaders and parents and teachers and unions and the kids' choir you just heard before, we're all here saying the same thing. So I want to just thank Jamaal, Congressman Bowman, for having the courage of common sense to actually say less testing, more teaching, and aligning the accountability system of the federal government not to an era 2 or 3 or 4 decades ago, but to the era that we're in right now. That is why we are here. It's long past time to do it, and I hope every single Republican who has blasted the tests and every Democrat who has said we need to make schools more in alignment with what is happening in the 21st century, they need to support Representative Bowman's bill. Thank you.
This is like a family reunion up here. That's why Randy calls me Jamaal so casually. She knew me when I was Jamaal. Mr. Bowman as a teacher initially, then as a principal, now as a congressman, which is still kind of crazy for me to say. But thank you all so much for being here.
Okay,
you
thanks.
heard our arguments, you heard our case, you heard our common sense. Please go out there and contact your representative to support this bill. And Randy makes a great point. The Republican Party hates standardized testing. So if you do, we have a bill for you to be a co-sponsor of, and you can help us get it through the House and get it through the Senate and bring the transformational change that we need to our public schools and kids as soon as this year. Thank you all so much. God bless you. Thank you to everyone. Absolutely. Let's